Good afternoon and welcome to the BRR Legal Brief, looking at the major legal issues affecting Australian business. I'm David Bushby and today we're talking about the Personal Property Securities Register, which is a brand new register which kicked off on Monday and since then has taken some 60,000 registration of securities since that date. Here to discuss what this register means for business is Helena Busljeta from Mallesons Jaques here in Sydney. Welcome, Helena.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Helena, if I can just kick off with, in simple terms, what is this register all about?
The PPS Register is essentially a notice board. It allows a person with an interest in an asset to give the world notice that it has that interest in that asset. And in some cases, that person should give that notice in order to protect their interest in the assets. There are three key points to note about the register. The first one is that it does not relate to interests in land. Secondly, it's an online register that is available 24/7. And thirdly, the PPS system is not merely about the introduction of this register. It will also affect the way that you own assets and that you use assets to raise finance.
Well, you're saying that it's affecting all assets apart from property. That's a very wide range of things that it affects. A lot of people own assets, of course. Who will this register affect the most?
Banks will be affected quite heavily because obviously they lend money and they take security. But banks have been preparing for PPS for the last 3 years and we've been involved in advising a number of banks on how they can prepare for PPS. But the effect of PPSA is not just limited to banks. It will also affect many corporates, and many corporates will not be aware that that is the case. Now, the extent to which the PPS will affect any given corporate really depends on the nature of their business. If your asset value is tied up in assets that you let other people use, then you are likely to be significantly affected. For example, if you lease goods or if you supply goods on retention of title terms.
Well, if we can just maybe take that example, I guess what will be the effect if, what's the risk that you take if you don't register your security and you're running businesses like that?
The biggest risk you face is that you may lose your asset. That may happen even if you have legal title to the asset and even if that asset is recorded in your balance sheet. So for example, if you supply goods to a customer on retention of title terms and that customer becomes insolvent, what you may find is that if you have not registered your security interest, another bank that has a security over that customer's assets may be able to take the asset out from under you and sell it. That will mean that you'll end up being an unsecured creditor, lining up with other unsecured creditors, and you may be lucky to get a cent back in a dollar.
So very serious implications and obviously a massively wide-ranging reform. I understand that other countries such as Canada, New Zealand have had this system or similar system in place for quite some time. What's been the experience in those countries and can we expect similar issues here in Australia?
That's a good question, David. Our system is not new. We are not pioneers in this space. Our PPS system is based on the New Zealand system, which has been in place since 1999. That in turn is modelled on the Canadian system, which they introduced in the early 70s. And that in turn is based on a system which was introduced in America in the 1950s. So given the history of the PPS system, we expect that we will face similar issues. The feedback that we have been given from the market in New Zealand is that while there is trauma in the transition, like all change, the world is a better place in a PPS system.
Well, just moving towards that new world for the Australian system, what are, I guess, the first steps a business or a lender should take to make sure they don't get caught out?
The first thing you really need to do is obtain legal advice to work out what the implications are for your business. Now, before you pick up the phone and call Mallesons or another law firm, you should be aware that there is actually a wealth of information on PPS out there on the internet. So, for example, you can log on to the PPS Register website and there is a lot of information and material that you can read there. You can also go to websites of law firms. Law firms have been publishing alerts on PPS over the course of 2 years, so that information can be very helpful. And if you are a member of an industry association, for example, the Australian Equipment and Lessors Association, you should contact that industry body because they may have material and guidance that they can also provide to you. I think it is worth investing that time just to give yourself a feel for the issues and to work out whether or not PPSA will have an impact on you.
Well, some fantastic insights, and thank you again for your time today, Helena.
Thank you, David.
That was Helena Busljeta joining us on the BRR Legal Brief. And viewers, thank you for joining us on today's episode. We look forward to your company next week for the Legal Brief.